So I'm going to be solving the USACO 2015 December contest bronze problem 3 contaminated milk. So what we see here is that Farmer John has some N friends and M types of milk featured at the party, and exactly one of them is contaminated. And we're going to see which of them are possibly contaminated and what the maximum amount of people that could have been contaminated are. So how the input goes is that these are events that happened where person 1 drank milk 1 at time t, and it's the same for follows. Person 1 drank milk 4 at time 1, and notice that nothing is necessarily sorted in any order. And then in the last few lines, or in the last S lines, we have information about who got sick. So person 1 got sick at time 3, and person 2 got sick at time 8. So what we have to check is what type of milk could have been possibly the bad milk. So in this scenario, N is the number of friends Farmer John has invited to the party. 4 is the number of types of milk, and it's also M. D is the number of events, let's say, where one person drank some kind of milk at point in time T. And 2 is the number of people that got sick and at the time they got sick. So what we have to check here is that person 1 got sick at time 3. This means that they must have drank the contaminated milk before time 3, like in time 1 or in time 2. And person 2 also got sick at time 8. This means that person 2 must have also drank the same contaminated milk before time 8. So in between times 1 through 7. So what we'll need to do is we'll have to check all of the types of milk that the sick people drank before they got sick, and then and then see if every single sick person drank that milk. If every single sick person drank that milk before they got sick, that means it could possibly be a bad milk. And then afterwards, we're going to have to count how many people in total could have drank that milk. So let's test out this sample input. Okay. So first of all, let's just sort the order in which things happen. So at time period 1, person 1 drinks milk 1. And then in time period 1, person 1 drinks milk 4. And then in time period 2, person 1 drinks milk 2. And then in time period 3, person 1 gets sick. This basically means that person 1 drank milk 1, 4, and 2 before they got sick, which means that the contaminated milk has to be in between 1, 4, and 2. And then let's keep on sorting. Person 3 drank milk 1 at time 3. Person 1 drank milk 3 at time 4. Person 2 drank milk 1 at time 5. Person 2 drank milk 2 at time 7. And then they got sick at time 8. So what this basically means is that because person 2 drank milk 1 and 2 before they got sick, that means that the contaminated milk could have been milk 1 or 2. So we see that person 1 has drank milks 1, 2, and 4 before they got sick, and person 2 has drank 1 and 2 before they got sick. So the overlapping region is definitely 1 and 2. So we see that the contaminated milk could have either been 1 or 2, but we're still unsure of that. And so is Farmer John. So he's trying to find the minimum number of doses of medicine that he needs to obtain so he can guarantee that he will have sufficiently many doses to treat all the people who become sick. What this is basically saying is that we have to find the maximum amount of people that could have been infected from one contaminated milk. So we have to go again through all of the input values and see how many people drank milk 1 or how many people drank milk 2. inputs. So we see that person 1 drank milk 1. So for contaminated milk 1, person 1 drank it. And we also see that person 3 also drank it. So person 3 also drank it. And person 2 also drank contaminated milk 1 at 0.5 in time. So all three people all three people mentioned in here drank the contaminated milk at one point in time. Now we check contaminated milk 2. And we see that in time 2, person 1 drank milk 2, so we add 1. And we see that person 2 drank milk 2 as well at time 7. And here we see that more people drank contaminated milk 1 than they did in contaminated milk 2. That means that Farmer John is going to need 3 doses of medicine to guarantee that he can treat everyone who became sick due to the contaminated milk. So the answer is 3. So what we'll need is a class that uses comparable to sort all of the input by the time that it was given. But we do notice that the people who got sick don't have a milk number that denotes like what kind of milk they drank, because it doesn't make sense to. It's just talking about who got sick and at what time. So we can see that the milk they drank was -1 to show that it was this line is about them getting sick. So for example, we can add -1 here and -1 here. And if we encounter -1, it just means that its data is about one person getting sick at time t. And we're also going to need to get all of these values, and then at one point, after sorting them, we're going to have to check which people are actually drinking what milk. We're going to have to store that in some kind of two-dimensional array so that we get to know what type of people actually drink which milk, so that we can count how many people drink each contaminated milk at the end. So we're going to need a class that implements comparable and sorts it by time. It's going to be ascending. And we're also going to need some kind of array, like a two-dimensional array, that's going to include all of the data about who drank what kind of milk. So it's going to be two-dimensional array with data about who drank what milk. And what we'll also need is some way of checking if this milk is possibly bad or contaminated. So first we're going to need some kind of array, a Boolean array that's going to check if this milk is possibly contaminated. So we're going to need a Boolean array, one-dimensional array, that's contaminated milk. And it's going to show which milks are contaminated and which ones aren't. So contaminated milk shows which milk types can possibly be contaminated. Now, we can do this in several ways, but one way to do this is to check that if a sick person, by setting all the values in the Boolean array to true, and then checking if a sick person has drank it before. So in this case, we would be setting the values in index 1, 4, and 2 to true, and the rest of them we would change to false. And then in this case, we would be changing the values 2 and keeping the values 2 and 1 to true in the Boolean array, and then setting all the rest of them to false. So we would get all the overlapping milk types of milk that the sick person drank, which would be 1 and 2, and we would be able to use that to check how many people drank those contaminated milk. So we can start coding at this point. First, util. And then we're going to need int n, m, d, and s, which is the input, static. And we're also going to need the maximum value. So the maximum amount of doses of medicine that Farmer John needs to acquire. And we're going to need those Boolean arrays. So static Boolean bad milk, which is 2-dimensional. And let's keep bad milk 1-dimensional and data as 2-dimensional, where data is it includes the data about which milk each person eats, and bad milk is about which milk are possibly contaminated. And we're also going to need to have a class, so let's create that now. Static class, let's call it milk, I guess, and implement comparable. Okay. And then we're going to have to add an unimplementable method. And then we're going to have int p, so the person, m, which is the type of milk, and t, which is time. So milk, int a, int b, int c, a, b equals c. So we're done initializing. And we also need to make sure that we can print it out. So public string to string return p plus. Okay. And then in the sorting section, if it's the same time period, then we have to do return this dot t minus o dot t because it's going to be ascending. But we have to make sure that sometimes one person can drink multiple types of milk at the same time period. Now, it usually wouldn't matter, but since we remember that we're going to be setting the events of people getting sick as -1, we have to sort that too, since people get sick after they drank it. And if it's the same time period, it also can count as a contaminated milk. So we have to do if this dot time is the same as o dot time, then return this dot t. So if the times are the same, then you have to return this dot milk minus o dot milk, so that the milk is in ascending order. And we're done with our class, so we create a static array. So static milk. Let's call it A for array. And of course, we need buffer reader, static buffered reader in, static string tokenizer, and static print writer out. Okay, now we can create public static void main add milk.in. Now we have to throw an IO exception. And then we have to do the initializing and then the solving. Okay. Static void. Let's start with the initialization. So we're gonna need to use a string tokenizer to get all the integers NMDS first. So st equals new string tokenizer in dot read line. And we have to throw an exception here too. And then we copy that for each of the other values. And then we have to create the array with the class that we created. So a equals new milk. It has to be d plus s because d is the number of people. D is the number of these events, but s is also the number of people who got sick and the times that they got sick. So we have to do d plus s to include both of them. And then we have to do for int I equals 0, I is less than b plus ai equals new milk integer.parseInt next token. But we have to subtract 1 because we remember that this is starting from 1 and we have to make sure that it's indexed since we're going to put it into election array. Minus 1, same thing, and then the same thing, but except it's not the minus 1 since it's just time, so it doesn't matter. And then for int I equals d, I is less than e plus s, I plus plus, so this is going through all the sick data, where people got sick. A of I. Oh wait, we have to create the string tokenizer. T equals new string tokenizer in the read line. S equals and then A of I equals new milk. Same thing, except in the middle we don't have an input value for the number of milk, so we just put -1 to mark that it's someone getting sick. And then we have to do arrays.sort A. And then we initialize bad milk and data. So bad milk equals new boolean m. Data equals new boolean. Okay. So we've got the initialization part covered. Now we have to do the solve. Static void solve. So the first thing we have to do is we have to fill bad milk with true, since first of all we're assuming that all of the milk are contaminated at first. So we have to do arrays.fill bad milk true. And then we have to go through each of the milk. So for milk t in array A, if t.m equals -1, so if it's data talking about like someone getting sick at time t, then for int I equals 0, I plus m, I plus plus, bad milk equals bad milk, I, and data. So what this is basically doing is that it's checking to see if that person drank this milk before they were sick. Since it's in sorted order, the only information in data right now is events prior to that person getting sick. And if they both got sick and this bad milk remains true, and the person drank the milk before they got sick, so this is what that's saying, then we keep it at true. But let's say one of these conditions wasn't true. So let's say bad milk I was already false. It was already proved to not be a contaminated milk. Then it's gonna stay a contaminated milk because everyone who was sick has to have drank that milk before they got sick. Or if the sick person didn't drink the milk before they were sick, that means there's no possible way for it to be contaminated. So it must be false. And else, so if it's not data about some person getting sick, then data p.person p.milk equals true. So right now in data, we have all the data about who drank what milk, and in bad milk, we should have the data about which milk could be possibly contaminated. And then now that all that is said, we just have to go concatenate through all of the possible types of milk and check if they're possibly contaminated. And if they are contaminated, we have to check how many people drank that milk. So int I equals 0 minus m plus plus. Since there are m types of milk, and if it is a bad milk, so if bad milk I, so if it's a possible bad milk, then count equals 0, since we have to count it. Equals 0, j is less than n, since that's the amount of friends that were invited over, and we have to check each of the friends. And if data ji, if that person drank that milk, we count plus plus. And then since we have max equals mat.max, and that's basically it. Mat.println max. Alright, let's test it. And yeah, it worked.